Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to our monthly E3 Parent Summit. The purpose of our E3 Summit is to engage our families, equip them with practical resources they can use to empower them to succeed on their journey in independent study with the Blue Ridge Academy. Please note that this session will be recorded for future viewing on our Blue Ridge Academy Parent Information Center, along with all of our other previously recorded sessions that you're welcome to view at a later time. To help this session run smoothly, here are a couple requests that we have before we begin our presentation. Please keep your microphones muted and cameras turned off. You are welcome to submit any questions into the comment box, and we will address them during our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Anna Aguilar, and I'm one of 3 family liaisons here to support our families and staff at the Blue Ridge Academy, along with Alicia Chavez and Shannon Eves. We specialize in supporting our wonderful families with virtual resources such as this, valuable workshops, vendor support, and we also moderate all of our social media platforms for the Blue Ridge Academy. Today, we have a guest speaker. Catherine is a writer and speaker. She is the author of Childhood Unplugged, Practical Advice to Get Kids Off Screen and Find Balance, which was published in 2023, and the creator of a fast-growing Substack newsletter called The Analog Family. She is a contributor to the Globe and Mail, Canada's premier newspaper. As a speaker on behalf of the anxious generation, Catherine gives presentations that empower people to limit screen time using a digital minimalist philosophy. Her approach is not anti-tech, but full of practical strategies for putting digital media in its rightful place. As a mother of 3, she offers smart guidance on when to give kids smartphones and how to deal with social pressures, how to give kids more independence, and why we all have a responsibility to solve this collective action problem. We are so privileged to have Catherine speaking exclusively with our Blue Ridge parents, teachers, and staff today. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce Catherine Martinko.
Thank you so much, Anna, for such a warm welcome. That was just lovely. And thank you to all of you who it sounds are foregoing some fantastic weather in California right now to be part of this seminar. So I do appreciate your attention and your time over the next hour or so. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here, as I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like you all to see. So hopefully you can all see this. Is that working, Anna? Is that clear?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, I would like to start with a short story. It's a story that for me was the moment when I realized things had gone terribly wrong. This happened several years ago. I had gotten to know a woman who had recently immigrated to Canada. She had several children, one of which was a very young baby, and this child always seemed to be very, very sleepy. I had a young baby who was the same age, and he made it his life mission to essentially avoid sleep. And I found this very puzzling, the difference between the 2 children. So one day, as I was sitting in a doctor's office with this woman, she told me that she drugged her baby to sleep. She said to me, "It's common practice back home. I did it with all my other kids. It makes kids so easy to manage." She said, "You should really try it with your own kid." Well, she said that her supply was running low and she was hoping to ask the doctor that day for a refill. I was understandably shocked. I said, "You can't do that. The doctor's never going to give you that. We do not sedate children here in Canada to settle them down and make them easier to manage." The woman was quite upset with me. She turned away, and I was left to gaze around the waiting room. That's when I noticed that the room was completely silent. The toy box in the corner sat untouched. Every single child in that waiting room was sitting silently with their eyeballs glued to a tablet or a phone, and their parents were doing the same thing. So much for my defense of cultural norms. The Canadian kids all around me were being sedated as well, just in a completely different way. I tell this story not to pass judgment. I'm sure we've all struggled to manage sick children in a doctor's waiting room before, but rather to paint a picture of a social experiment gone wrong. When the handheld device like the iPad and the tablet exploded into our lives only 15 years ago, these things were met with enthusiasm, understandably. They were a parent's dream come true. They were a way to manage a child and keep them calm, no matter what, to captivate their attention. But our enthusiasm has soured a little bit over time. We have witnessed a few too many scenes like that doctor's waiting room, where children are so engrossed in screens that they're completely checked out from the world around them, oblivious to everything that's happening in their vicinity. Scientific studies are also now starting to validate the sense that in our mad rush to make parenting easier, maybe we've lost something somewhat serious in the process. And many parents and teachers are wondering, what have we lost? And more importantly, can we get it back? I find that even adults without children are asking the same question because smartphones, despite their usefulness, have stolen something from all of us. And so this is a talk for everyone, regardless of your parental status. So, as Anna already said, I am an author, I am an editor, and a writer. My first book, Childhood Unplugged, came out in 2023. It followed a decade of work as a journalist and an editor, as well as a parenting columnist for the Discovery Network. The book has led to some really fantastic collaborations, including joining Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation campaign team and contributing to the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's largest newspaper. I also write an email newsletter called the Analog Family, which I highly encourage you to subscribe to. It's free, and I write 2 articles a week on that platform. Now, my interest in digital media's effects on children is also deeply personal. I have 3 sons. They are aged 15, 13, and 9. So I am witnessing firsthand how excessive screen time is affecting their friends, their peers, and their broader generation. This also means that I get to deal with their very strong opinions about not having smartphones when most of their friends do. More on that later. So, how did I get on this path? You might be wondering. It's rather an unorthodox, unconventional approach. I was raised without TV and internet in a very rural setting in northern Ontario in Canada, and I have fond memories of a childhood that was filled with play and nature time. Whereas my husband was raised on excessive TV and video games, and he feels that he missed out on a whole lot of childhood. We opted not to start down that path with our own kids, aware that it's always harder to claw back technology than to avoid introducing it in the first place. So today, over the course of the next 45 to 55 minutes or so, we will talk about some of the problems associated with the tech takeover of kids' lives, and I will give you plenty of real, solid, practical solutions that you can implement immediately in your homes, regardless of your child's age, gender, or their current tech habits. But I am going to challenge you to do some hard things. I take a harder line than most people on this topic. I do not think children should have smartphones before the age of 16. I do not think kids should have social media before the age of 18. And I do believe that it is up to the parents to enforce those boundaries. The great rewiring of childhood, as it's been called, is a serious problem and it deserves a serious response. Now, I realize you might be squirming in your seat, worried that I'm about to ask you to get rid of your smartphone and your laptop, but I will not do that. I'm not anti-tech at all. But we do need to learn to put technology in its rightful place, where it's a powerful tool, not a toy, nor the primary source of our entertainment. Rather, we should strive to be what author Cal Newport has described as a techno-selectionist, someone who carefully chooses which technologies to adopt and integrate into their life, and isn't afraid to reject certain ones when they fail to add value. In effect, taking back control of our time and our attention and making devices subservient to us rather than the other way around. So let's just get a sense of how much time kids are spending on their devices. A 2023 survey found that the daily total entertainment screen time for tweens between the ages of 8 and 12 is 5.5 hours a day. For teenagers, it's 8 hours and 40 minutes, and just under 5 of those hours are devoted to social media platforms alone. Now, please keep in mind that this is entertainment-based screen time only. It does not include screen time used for school or for homework. This means that scrolling is the thing teens are doing more than any other thing in their lives. It's more time than they're in school. It could be more time than they're working a part-time job. It could even be more time than they're sleeping. It's certainly more time than they spend doing all the things that teens used to do in the past. Things like going outside, meeting up with friends, reading books, developing hobbies, helping out with chores, and going on dates. Half of teens say that they are on their phones almost constantly, and when they are not on their phones, they are thinking about their phones. Adults are not that much better, unfortunately. The average American picks up their phone 144 times a day and spends over 4 hours a day on their phone, 2.5 of those on social media alone. Now, if you're feeling a little bit smug, thinking, I spend way less time than that on my phone, just take a look at this math. 1 hour of screen time a day adds up to 15 days per year. 2 hours a day is 30 days a year, all the way up to 5 hours of screen time a day, which totals a whopping 76 days per year. Now, imagine what you could accomplish if you reallocated a fraction of that time to something more productive or even more enjoyable. I don't say that every single minute of your day needs to be devoted to productivity, but the things we pay attention to make us who we are, and over time, they end up comprising our entire lives. So, why should we be concerned that kids are spending this much time on their devices? I think of it as a two-part problem. First of all, there are the actual negative effects of too much screen time. These are social, emotional, neurological, and even physical. Then there's the opportunity cost, which are the things kids miss out on because they're on the screens. Active play, quiet downtime, face-to-face interactions with others. Kids most of the time do not use their screen time constructively. Much as we would like to believe otherwise, these are generalizations, but boys gravitate to YouTube, Reddit, online multiplayer video games, as well as porn. That is because these websites offer boys the agency building activities that they crave. Things like exploring, competing, playing at war, mastering skills, except that none of it is real. It's an illusion, and boys end up feeling profoundly lonely and isolated, disconnected from others, and lacking practical skills. Girls, on the other hand, gravitate to social media apps. This is because girls are deeply affected by visual comparison. For females, social standing has always been tied to looks. Their aggression tends to be more relational, and these platforms make it very easy to be mean. And they are more prone to sharing their emotions than boys, which these platforms, of course, reward with more views, likes, and comments. The more emotional you are, the more attention you get. A very interesting study from 2022 in Nature Communications showed that social media is most harmful to girls between the ages of 11 and 13, and to boys when they are between the ages of 14 and 15. This, ironically, is precisely when kids usually start using social media. These ages have been described by researchers as distinct windows of developmental sensitivity, when higher estimated social media use predicts a decrease in life satisfaction ratings a year later, and vice versa. Lower estimated social media use predicts an increase in life satisfaction ratings. I like to show this slide to illustrate the power of filters on social media. Being a teenager is already tough, but girls nowadays face impossibly high beauty standards among their very own peers, who used filters to transform their faces from ordinary to a hypersexualized, homogenized standard of beauty that, again, is not even real. Even more troubling, there has been an increase in injectables and plastic surgeries to try to recreate this so-called Instagram face in the real world. While it doesn't hurt to have some of one's social interactions online, problems arise when that is where the majority of one's social life exists. Virtual interactions are inferior to in-person, and there are a number of reasons for why that's the case. First of all, virtual interactions are asynchronous. This means that they happen out of sync. You can send a text, and then you can end up waiting minutes, hours, sometimes even days before you get a response. Virtual interactions are also disembodied, which means that you miss out on the facial cues and the body language that goes along with natural, normal human communication. Virtual interactions often happen in very large groups, which means that communication becomes performative. You're up on a soapbox online, proclaiming opinions to the world and exposing yourself to public backlash from people who do not actually care about you at all. Virtual interactions have a low bar for entry or exit, meaning there is a lack of incentive to treat somebody kindly and to repair misunderstandings. It's so easy to ghost someone, to delete a profile, to rage quit online. You really can't do that as easily in the real world. This environment has been devastating for Gen Z. Rates of anxiety and depression have surged in the years since smartphones arrived, and it's not because of pandemics, climate change, school shootings, financial crises, political polarization, wars, or inequality, though none of those things help particularly. The timing just doesn't align, nor does it explain why preteen girls are the demographic that's suffering the most, or why these trends hold across the entire Anglosphere. Rather, the evidence points to something very big and very serious happening in young people's lives, starting in the early 2010s, which is when smartphones and the social media bomb went off. The difference is we adults had had a chance to grow up and to mature, and so we're doing okay, whereas our children, they're still forming and they are suffering as a result. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 40% of high school students in 2023 reported feeling sad and hopeless, up from 28% in 2011. 1 in 5 high school students has seriously considered attempting suicide, compared to only 13% 10 years ago. The numbers are far worse for girls specifically. The CDC said in 2021, almost 60% of female students experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness during the past year. Nearly 25% made a suicide plan. Self-harm rates have surged. For young teenage girls, it nearly tripled between 2010 and 2020. For older teen girls, it doubled. When it comes to successful suicides, the rate has gone up 167% from 2010 to 2021. Prior to that, it had stayed within the same limited range since the 1980s. This is unprecedented, and many health organizations have sounded alarms. In 2021, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, as well as the Children's Hospital Association all issued a joint declaration declaring an emergency in child and adolescent mental health. And then in 2024, the US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, issued an official advisory against social media, citing a profound risk of harm and saying that we do not have adequate evidence to determine whether social media is safe for kids. In an editorial for the New York Times, Dr. Murthy wrote, "Why is it that we have failed to respond to the harms of social media when they are no less urgent or widespread than those posed by unsafe cars, planes, or food?" Kids who spend time online, whether it's on social media or on YouTube or in chat rooms online with strangers, are exposed to an ugly world. There is abundant content praising anorexia, offering starvation diets, teaching kids how to cut themselves, saying the world would be a better place without them, and explaining how best to go about killing themselves. One report from the Center for Countering Digital Hate found that TikTok started recommending content tied to eating disorders and self-harm to 13-year-olds within 30 minutes of them signing up for the platform. And if they were identified as vulnerable users with keywords such as lose weight in their profile, they were served far worse content, 12 times more videos on self-harm and suicide than the standard accounts. There is rampant cyberbullying, and when it happens online, kids cannot escape. It follows them home. This is Kristen Bride, whose son Carson killed himself at 16 after being bullied on Snapchat. She wrote a moving essay for After Babel, saying that he received nearly 100 harassing, threatening, and sexually explicit messages in the weeks leading up to his death. These messages came from his high school Snapchat friends who had hidden their identities within the app. Now, if you have ever worried about what creepy strangers your child might encounter walking alone, I assure you that there are already far more lurking in their DMs. The UK's Internet Watch Foundation made a video that shows a mother preparing dinner in the kitchen while her teenage daughter waits upstairs in her room, waiting to be called for the meal. Meanwhile, as the mother cooks, a parade of strange men comes in the house behind her, entering through the front door, walking up the steps to the teenage girl's room. They surround her bed. They whisper lewd comments. They ask her to take off her clothes. They say, "Don't be shy." Meanwhile, the oblivious mother just continues to bustle around the kitchen, assuming her daughter is safe because she is at home, but failing to realize what else could be going horribly wrong. Sadly, the internet is a candy shop for predators. Roblox was recently described as a pedophile hellscape by one internet watchdog. And another report showed that Pinterest is rife with adult males who create sex-themed image boards of little girls that they follow. Arturo Bejar is a former Meta engineer who testified recently in front of US Congress. He explained just how massive the scale of online sexual abuse is on Instagram. He said, within the space of a typical week, 1 in 8 adolescents between the ages of 13 and 15 experiences an unwanted sexual advance on Instagram. Now, when you multiply that out by the hundreds of millions of teens who are using Instagram globally, it means that Instagram hosts the largest scale sexual harassment of teens to ever have happened. And then there's porn. It's everywhere. 94% of kids have seen it by the age of 14. The UK Children's Commissioner reported in 2023 that because of porn, almost half, so 47% of young people between the ages of 16 and 21, believe that girls expect sex to involve physical aggression. Now take a moment to think about that. By giving kids phones, which are portals to porn, whether or not we like it, we are essentially training them to be violent toward women. And we are also telling girls that that's what they should expect because it's what is depicted. So here are 2 good questions to ask yourself if you're thinking about getting your kid a phone. First, are you ready for your child to have access to the entire internet? Or are you ready for the entire internet to have access to your child? If your answer is no to either one of those questions, you might want to reconsider handing over such a device. What I have concluded after many years of research is that there is no way to keep a child truly safe online. I am no helicopter parent. My goal is not absolute safety, but right now we've got things backwards. Kids are overprotected in the real world and underprotected in the virtual world. It's time to turn that around. This leads now to the second part of the problem, which is the erosion of play in kids' lives. This started happening before smartphones and social media became so prevalent, but it rapidly accelerated after that, to the point where the average US kid now spends only 4 to 7 minutes per day outside, whereas American inmates are entitled to 2 full hours of outdoor time each day. Now, parents are understandably afraid to send their kids outside. Many cite fears of kidnapping, getting lost, injury, traffic accidents, and more. Some of these fears are justifiable. They make sense, others less so. A child would have to loiter in public for 750,000 years in order for it to be statistically likely that they would get kidnapped in a stereotypical stranger in a white van scenario. Kids, meanwhile, need desperately to play freely in unorganized settings. It's critical for development. Play trains fine and gross motor skills. It develops muscle strength. It socializes them, teaches them how to engage with other kids, negotiate the rules of a game, problem solve without relying on an adult to intervene. Play is a chance to make mistakes and to learn from them in a low-cost environment. You can get feedback from playmates and your own physical body on what's okay to do and what's not. In unsupervised outdoor play, kids learn how to handle physical and mental challenges. This builds confidence, which is a fantastic cure for anxiety. It's a positive feedback loop because the parents who see their kids' ability to do things then become more willing to let their kids be independent, and those children in turn become better prepared for adulthood. Don't get me wrong, the parental urge to protect a child is completely natural, but trying to shield them from all the ups and downs of life goes against the entire goal of childhood, which is to raise an adult. I really love this list of things that an 18-year-old should be able to do. It comes from a book called How to Raise an Adult, written by Julie Lythcott-Haims, former dean of freshmen at Stanford University, who became alarmed by incoming students' lack of practical skills. She created this list. 18-year-olds should be able to talk to strangers, navigate a new location on their own, manage school assignments, contribute to running a household, cope with the ups and downs of life, earn and manage money, and take risks. Now, it's important to recognize that training for all of these things essentially starts at day one. It's cumulative. And if kids are spending upwards of 9 hours a day on their devices, which we already said is the average amount of time they're spending on entertainment based screen time only, that is a whole lot of time that they could be devoting to learning some of these practical life skills. Now, one final note before we get into solutions: phones, tablets, and video games are sometimes described as experience blockers. When they enter a child's life, they reduce interest in all non screen based activities. When a kid has access to these devices, particularly if it's unlimited, they just don't want to do much else. The devices are too powerful. They hijack the human brain, tantalizing it with unpredictable rewards and novelty, tapping into our primal fear of missing out and wanting to be loved, taking advantage of our innate curiosity, our laziness, and our inclination to self medicate. There is very good reason why they have been called the modern day hypodermic needle. Now, there are many things that need to be done about this, but not all of them can be done by those of us sitting here in this room today. We do need high level legislative change, including a higher internet age of adulthood, not 13 as it's been since 1998, long before smartphones existed in the form that they do now, preferably something like 16. We also need to hold tech companies accountable and require them to design products that are less harmful. This is something they could easily do. And we need age gating, which could be enforced so that kids do not have access to the violent, addictive, overly mature content that we restrict for them in the real world. Things like gambling, strip clubs, X-rated movies, skydiving, driving cars, getting tattoos, buying alcohol and drugs. We do not let kids dabble with these things because we know that their brains can't handle it. Kids and devices have been described as a collective action problem. So, this is when a group would be better off if everyone in the group took a particular action, but individuals are deterred from acting because unless others do the same, the personal cost outweighs the benefit. For example, many kids get on social media not because they want to be on it particularly, but just because that's where all of their friends are. Here's a good example of a collective action problem. There was a study conducted by researchers at the University of Chicago. They took 1,000 American college students and asked them to consider two different scenarios. Number one, how much money would it take to deactivate your Instagram and your TikTok accounts for 4 weeks? The response was $50. Condition number two, how much would it take for you to deactivate your Instagram and TikTok if others did so as well? The answer was less than zero. In other words, the participants would pay the researchers to make that scenario come about. As the study authors concluded, the students would prefer the product not to exist, but they cannot coordinate to stop using it. Another fascinating piece of data is this study conducted last year that asked over 1,000 American teenagers what they think of social media. Now, keep in mind that most of these kids are almost all using it and are spending on average 5 hours a day on these platforms. Many wish the products had never been invented. 43% would undo Snapchat if they could. 47% would undo TikTok. And almost half say that they will never let their own children have smartphones before high school. 30% is said to be the magic number, the tipping point, when it becomes much easier for parents to say no to smartphones and to social media if 30% of their kids' peers do not have it. But reaching that magic number requires parents who are willing to say no when it is hard, to be early adopters of a philosophy that very much goes against the status quo right now. What we can do as parents and as educators is change our behaviors at home. This will have an immediate effect on our own lives and a ripple effect within our social groups and our broader communities. Parents, I want you to feel empowered. Do not feel ashamed of how you may have handled screens in the past. You can do this because we have new information. We have to remember that we are our children's first line of defense. We are also training their future habits, and you do not need permission to do something that you know to be good for them. At this point, I would like to show you some of my own family's digital media rules. So number one, my kids cannot have a smartphone before the age of 16. For a long time, they would ask me when they would be allowed to get one, and I would just say, I don't know, not yet. Then I heard Dr. Jean Twenge, who's a psychologist at San Diego University and the author of two very famous books, Generations and iGen, say in an interview that her own three teenage daughters would not be receiving smartphones until they turned 16. She said that owning a smartphone should be on par with getting a driver's license in terms of the level of maturity required to operate one. That made a lot of sense to me, and it became my new guideline. We do have a landline in our home, and it's fantastic. It's voice over IP. It only costs us $6 a month, and the kids can make calls. They can still communicate with their friends whenever they want to. They can communicate with me and with their dad. They love being able to call their grandparents and their uncles, and I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to their conversation skills improve over the time that we've had this landline. Rule number 2, no social media before 18. Social media's downsides far outweigh its benefits. It really is no place for kids. And if it's serious enough for the Surgeon General of the United States to issue an official advisory cautioning us against using it, we probably should not be giving it to our kids. Rule number 3, computers are a great way to communicate. My kids can still participate in group chats and get their fair share of silly memes and videos from an Apple desktop computer that sits in a common area of our home. But that's where it stays. It does not leave in their pocket, accessible every single minute of the day. My oldest son has a laptop that was issued by his public high school, something I protested initially but was told there was no workaround unless I chose to pull him out of the system completely. As I see it, that makes protecting his screen-free time all the more important. Finally, screen time does happen, but on special occasions or sporadically. We have a Netflix account. They can watch movies on a laptop, but it doesn't happen on a regular or a daily basis. For music, they use an old iPhone that is connected to Spotify, usually when they're doing the dishes or if they want to go do a workout in the garage gym. This is not an anti-tech approach. This is very much about putting technology in its rightful place. What is the result? Well, I would say kids who are active and athletic, who read books and play musical instruments, who know how to cook meals, do laundry, help out around the house, who can run errands around town on their bicycles. They can go to appointments and music lessons and sports practices on their own. These are kids who can carry on conversations with adults. They can make eye contact, and they can order from a menu with confidence. These are kids who have great senses of humor and a keen attentiveness to everything that's going on around them in the household. Now I would like to look at some specific age groups. First of all, we've got babies and toddlers, and my recommendations for this category certainly align with everything that is recommended also by the American Association of Pediatrics. So babies and toddlers ideally should not have access to tablets or smartphones. In fact, they should not have exposure to screens of any type before 24 months of age. They should have limited FaceTime with grandparents or close family members who happen to live far away. And if they are to be exposed to screens, they should be co-viewed by a parent or a caregiver. Now, this is obviously a very counterintuitive recommendation because screens are natural babysitters. That's what we want to use them for instinctively. And yet this is explicitly something that we should not be using them for. What can we do instead? I have found that with babies and toddlers, first of all, I'll say that this is the absolute easiest age group to not have screens. Young children do not know what they're missing. They cannot resent what they have never had in their life or understand that their life is different from other children. And so I would say if you can establish that habit, begin as you mean to go on, that can be very powerful. Establishing a daily routine is helpful for young children. Just having regular practices of eating, napping, and playtime to try to fill the void that an empty day is with a young child. It becomes less difficult to fall into relying on the device to fill that time. You can get loose part toys. So these are open-ended toys with a widely interpretable purpose. So they do more than just one thing. And the way that children use these toys will evolve based on the season, based on the child's mood, based on their playmate. You can read books to your child. You can listen to music. You can engage with your child one-on-one, involving them in whatever it is that you have to do instead of just handing over a screen to try to keep them quiet while you do it. And you can take your child outside. I think often parents underestimate the power of nature in keeping children entertained, in calming them down. It has a really wonderful effect on children and can be a great way to spend time. As kids get older, elementary age children, stick with the no smartphones or tablets, no video games, no social media, and limit the entertainment based screen time as much as you possibly can. Instead, you can get your kid a talk and text phone. There are fantastic, simpler devices that are available, particularly to those of you in the United States, and I will cover some specific options shortly. You can get a landline, like I discussed, use computers for messaging. Still lots of outdoor play, more loose part toys, which of course are going to evolve as the child matures and their interests change. Help your child to develop hobbies. Modeling hobbies as well is an excellent thing to do for your kid. And learning that boredom is okay, accepting that it is not our job as parents to entertain our children every single minute of the day, and that boredom can actually be a very deeply rich, creative state for a child to inhabit. Often it just means that something fantastic is waiting around the corner. For teens, still no smartphones before 16. Think of it as being something that's on par with a driver's license when it comes to the level of maturity that they need to use it. No social media before 18. Still no video games. Instead, give them a talk and text phone. Have a shared family phone, which some families I know use. It's a cell phone that is kept in a common area of the home that can be loaned out when someone actually needs it, but most of the time they do not have it. A landline is still useful. A surprising number of families I know are reinstalling these. They're not as archaic as they seem. Using computers for email and messaging, and then engaging in what's called high quality leisure activities. This is another wonderful concept from author Cal Newport, who wrote a book called Digital Minimalism. It refers to hobbies and interests that are active, not passive, that use skills to produce valuable things in a physical world, and that require real world social interaction. So, in other words, getting off the screens and looking into people's faces. Now, I'm hoping that you are sufficiently inspired by many of the things I'm saying and that you're going to turn to your child after this talk and say, we're tightening up the rules. Things are not going to be the same way that they were. Chances are your child is not going to be very happy with you. What will you say to them then? I have some sample scripts for you. These are phrases that I've used with my own children and that I've heard other families use as well. You can tell your kid, our family is different from other families. You can say, this is just how we do things in our home. I'm doing the best with the information I have. Or you are welcome to do things differently when you have your own home. This is my children's least favorite, of course. Now, I'm not the only one who has these sorts of scripts. There's a whole bunch that come from psychologist Dr. Becky Kennedy, who did a partnership with the Anxious Generation campaign team to help give parents the tools to deal with their children's frustration at having the rules changed when it comes to screen time. Dr. Becky said, you can tell your child social media isn't an option right now. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know this makes your life harder in some ways, and I know we will get through this. I love you. Or you can say, I've learned some new things about a specific app or a behavior, and I'm going to change the phone rules. I know this is frustrating, and I know it's important for your safety. I get that this feels annoying to you, and it will take some time to get used to. Now, I'm also a realist. I know that many people have screens in the home that they are not ready to get rid of, and you might be looking for some guidelines on how to manage those as well. So just in general, the bigger, the better. If you have the option between setting up your child to watch a movie on a large screen TV in your living room, that is preferable to handing them a little tiny device that they're watching, a phone or a tablet curled up in the corner of the couch. And it has to do with the level of neurological stimulation. So they get more sucked into the device the closer it is to their face. The further away it is, the more they have a little bit of distance, and it also is conducive to co-viewing that I mentioned before, especially for the younger children. They might be watching something with siblings, with family members, and they become less detached from their surroundings in the process of viewing. Basic is better, so always try to give your child the simplest form of the technology that's required to achieve whatever task you want to do. So you could give your kids something to read on a tablet, but it would be better to give them something to read on an e-reader. Even better would be a physical book. The same rule applies for phones. You really don't need to give them a smartphone, which is the most complicated form of technology that exists, if a talk and text phone can do the same purpose, or even a landline. No screens in bed. So we do know that exposure to the blue light that is emitted by many of these screens gets in the way of the release of melatonin, the hormone that induces sleepiness. We as adults are susceptible to this, which is why we aren't supposed to look at our phones ideally in the hour or two leading up to bed. It affects children even more profoundly. It can make it very hard for them to settle and to sleep well throughout the night. And no screens in the car may be another counterintuitive recommendation, but I find that being in the car is actually a really great opportunity for children to sit alone with their thoughts, something that many kids don't have a chance to do anymore. It's a time to process their day, to look out the window, to make observations about what they see, to orient themselves geographically in the world, which will help with their future navigation skills. I can also speak as a mother of teenage boys who don't tend to talk a whole lot about themselves, that some of the best conversations we have had occur in the car. Often when we're driving at night, we're both looking straight ahead, we're not making eye contact, and there's something about that warm, closed, intimate environment that has been conducive to some really wonderful conversations with them. If they had phones, we probably would not have had those discussions. No screens at mealtime. Of course, mealtime is a great opportunity for families to come together, especially if you have very busy schedules. It's a time to sit down and to debrief, to ask your kids about their day, and for you to tell your kids about your day, and screens get in the way of that. And then passive screens are better than interactive screens. This is a deeply counterintuitive recommendation that I am making, but the science supports it. So often parents and educators think that if a child is interacting with a device, so swiping on a tablet or an iPhone, that it is stimulating them in a more educational way, that it's better for their brain than just zoning out and watching a movie. That's actually wrong. So the same stimulus that the child is getting from interacting with the device is what leads to hyperstimulation, and it can lead to disordered, addictive use, and it makes it very hard for the child to come down neurologically after using the device. They are more prone to tantrums, particularly if they are young. This doesn't happen as readily if you put on a movie for a child because it has a natural narrative arc, and even a very young child can perceive that the story is coming to an end, that it's wrapping up and concluding, and they're going to be less likely to have a meltdown over it when it ends. Another interesting fact is that interactive screen time actually disrupts sleep quality far more than passive screen time. So, one study of 2,000 children looked at their sleep habits, and it found that only 30 minutes of interactive screen time was enough to affect their quality of sleep, whereas it took a full hour of passive screen time to have the very same effect. Another point that many people don't know is that claims that an app is educational are not substantiated. There is no third-party certification that will verify whether or not an app or a game is educational. A company can develop something and slap a label on it, and it is allowed to be sold in the educational section of the App Store with no further questions asked. So do not believe everything that you see there. Cal Newport wrote, oh, sorry, here we go. So if your child already has a smartphone, as I see it, you have two options available to you. Number one, you can take it back. It is entirely okay as a parent to change your mind, especially if you are armed with new information and no longer feel comfortable with a decision you may have made in the past. You can swap out that smartphone for a simpler device. We will go over some options shortly. You can deactivate or even delete social media profiles. Just because they've been created does not mean that they're permanent. It does not mean that they have to exist forever. You can tell your teen, we're just going to leave it for a year or two, and then we're going to come back to it. Or you can have a smashing ceremony. Now, I throw this one in there because I like to share a little anecdote about a friend of mine whose 9-year-old son was struggling terribly to regulate his tablet use. The father tried negotiating with him. They made deals, they signed contracts, but they could not figure it out. And the father told me that their family life just degraded into a constant battle over screen time until finally one day he took it out into the backyard, called the son over, and they took a hammer to it. The little boy participated in the iPad's destruction. This was 4 months ago, and he has never asked for it back since. I don't say that this would necessarily work for everyone, but it was an effective method for them. And it certainly managed to cure that little boy of its instinct to ask for the iPad because he knows it doesn't exist anymore. Option number two, of course, is if you do not want to get rid of your child's smartphone, you can set some new rules. You can establish strict phone-free times and zones within your home and within your child's life. So no phones during meals, during homework, in the hours leading up to bedtime, and preferably not even when they go to school. You can use a computer for group chats, as my sons do, or even for social media. So sometimes parents do not want to make their kids delete their social media presence, but they will say that they can only access it on a desktop computer, which adds that little bit of friction. It requires the child to sit down at that family computer in the home to check their Instagram or their pages, Facebook pages, whenever they want, instead of accessing it in their pocket from a handheld device every single minute of the day. You could also insist that your child not post anything, so sort of take on a passive role on social media, which still comes with a bit of a psychological cost from just viewing all of the content that's being put up there, but they're not opening themselves up for rejection or for criticism by their online audience. You can implement parental controls. There are very good ones out there. However, I do view it as something of a game of whack-a-mole. It's very exhausting to try to stay one step ahead of your kid and their screen habits at all times. Some parents are up to that challenge. And if you are, I think that that could potentially work for you. I do think, though, like I said, it can be a little bit exhausting at times. And regardless of what you do, you must always revisit family policies on a regular basis, at least quarterly, if not more frequently. So Cal Newport wrote that it is not enough to stop using problematic apps and devices. You must also aggressively pursue alternative actions that will fill the voids that digital abstention creates. Without a deeper purpose, he says, the shallow siren song of your phone will become impossible to ignore. Now, kids can't do this on their own. You have got to help them, and you will probably help yourself in the process. I call this filling the void. So, if your kids are used to playing on screens, you will have to go through a replacement process, which can be a bit deeply uncomfortable in the process, but it does get better. This is when digital entertainment is replaced with analog, offline toys and activities. And I maintain that modern kids still love many of the same toys that we loved when we were kids. I have invested in a number of things to get my boys outside. So we do have a backyard and we have space for a secondhand trampoline, a slack line, a treehouse that we built ourselves, as well as a basketball net in the driveway. If you can make your house into a welcoming destination for neighborhood kids, they will come, especially if you tell them that they are welcome. And the benefit of that is knowing roughly where your kids are and what they're doing. It is important to prioritize free play in your kids' lives, to deschedule their calendars so that they have opportunities to go outside and find friends to play with. And you may also need to train some of those solo navigation skills, and then you let them go. This is never easy. I recently let my 9-year-old ride his bike to Walmart. It was about a 1.5 mile ride. He had to buy Beyblades on his own. He crossed 4 lanes of traffic. He found the toy in the giant store, navigated the transaction all on his own, and then came back. I was nervous the entire time he was gone, but when he returned, he was far more visibly excited about the fact that he had done the outing on his own than the fact that he had these new toys he had wanted so badly. Ironically, the very same week, a mother in Georgia was arrested when her 10-year-old son wandered into town without her knowing. He was not in danger, but she was punished nonetheless for not knowing where he was every minute of the day. This is a dangerous mentality. It's one that disproportionately harms working and lower income families, and it cripples children's natural opportunities for growth. We have to fight back against this safetyism, this obsession with constant supervision, and let our kids be kids. Now, if you live in a place where you do not feel comfortable letting your kids out to play after school or riding bikes to the store, then you can advocate for Let Grow play clubs. These are before and after school groups where kids engage in multi-age play and are loosely supervised by an older teen who fills a role that is something like a lifeguard. Another idea is to try having a digital Sabbath as a family. This is a technological fast for 24 hours each week when all devices are powered down. One of my friends relies also on a lockbox to keep her phone out of reach whenever she's trying to have a focused work period. That could be a very good tool to use with teens as well. You could embark on micro adventures, which is a delightful concept from a British adventurer named Alastair Humphreys. He encourages people to do fun things between the hours of 5 p.m. and 9 a.m., which are often hours that we think of as being useless, that there's not enough time to do any kinds of adventures. He maintains you can find all kinds of fantastic things to do if you look hard enough. If you are stumped for inspiration, think to the past. Think about what you did. Most of us grew up in a pre-smartphone era and we survived just fine. How did we spend our time? Summer camp is another fantastic opportunity for kids, but only if it's device free. Many parents describe transformed children coming home after weeks at camp. They say that they have their kid back after years of them feeling like internet people, like strangers. Or you could even get a pet. I've heard from lots of families who say that this becomes a fantastic form of entertainment for children that is fully analog and develops responsibility. Now you can buy alternatives to smartphones. There are so many fantastic simple devices, and I have to say I'm a little bit envious of those of you in the US who have access to all of these alternatives. We don't have most of these in Canada. As you can see, this slide comes from Catherine Price. She wrote Choose Your Own Adventure Guide to Smartphone Alternatives. She's the author of How to Break Up with Your Phone, and she's done a lot of research on all of these different devices. She let me use this slide. I would also recommend that you check out a website called dumbwireless.com to see what's out there. My personal favorite is the Light Phone. Their third iteration is coming out this spring, I believe in May, and it is marketed as a premium minimalist product. Now, I do want to talk about school districts. Very few school districts have implemented meaningful phone bans. There's a lot of discussion about it, but it's being widely interpreted. Ontario, which is the province in Canada where I come from, recently implemented a phone ban that does really nothing because kids are still allowed to keep the phones on their person. And that does not stop them from looking, as we all know. Nor do I think it is fair that the burden of policing phones has fallen to teachers who already have a very difficult job. So what would I like to see in our physical schools? I would like to see full day phone bans implemented in all schools where phones are locked in magnetic yonder pouches from 9 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. There are some cheaper workarounds like manila envelopes or plastic cubby boxes that can be placed at the back of the classroom. Schools that do this see a surge in academic performance, more focus, less cheating in class, boosted teacher morale, better social cohesion, less bullying, improvement in children's mental health, and a corresponding decrease in need for mental health services. There are other things that schools can do as well to fight back against smartphones. Take a stand in favor of unplugging. This does not have to be an official policy, but just making a statement of support for families who choose to wait can be enormously empowering. Administrators could say, this school applauds all efforts by parents to keep their kids screen-free for as long as possible. Or administrators could say, please leave your phones at home. We aspire to be a phone-free zone. As a parent whose kids are the odd ones out, I assure you that every word of affirmation makes a difference. Now, avoid using social media for any sorts of school teams or clubs. Any school-related activity should not require a smartphone or a social media profile because this discriminates against the families who have made a choice to avoid these platforms. Teams and clubs should use different alternatives for their members. So something like a group email, a website that is updated regularly, maybe a group chat or an online calendar or an online spreadsheet instead. And avoid using QR codes in class. There was an incident in my son's 9th grade class when a visiting speaker threw up a QR code on the smartboard and asked all the students to scan it. My son was the only one who couldn't. He got singled out and it was quite embarrassing. The teacher later apologized to me for all the teasing that ensued. So do not assume that everyone has a smartphone. Another interesting issue is educational technology. Somehow, this notion of we should teach computer skills has morphed into we should teach all skills through a computer. Devices are being employed for everything, even when they are not well suited to the task. Take reading, for example. Kids are 3 times less likely to enjoy reading if it happens on a screen. Nor does educational gaming pay off. Consider Prodigy, a popular math game. It takes a staggering 888 test questions for a student to show a 1-point improvement on a standardized test. And that stat comes from Prodigy's own research. Devices invite distraction. To quote neuroscientist and educator Jared Cooney Horvath, the primary function of any tool is the manner in which 80% of people spend 80% of their time using it. So if kids are accustomed to using laptops and tablets for their entertainment, which they are, it's absurd to expect them to switch gears and use those same devices for learning. That is why most students who are doing homework on a computer cannot last more than 6 minutes before accessing social media, messaging their friends, or looking at other distracting content. And that is why, when using a laptop in class, students spend 38 minutes of every hour off task. Horvath says, it's not that the students of today have abnormally weak constitutions. It's that they have spent thousands of hours training themselves to use digital devices in a manner guaranteed to impair learning and performance. Nor do I buy the argument that kids need to be exposed to this technology from a young age in order to succeed professionally. First of all, it's evolving so fast that it won't look anything like this by the time they enter the workforce. Secondly, it is designed to be intuitive. We all learn to use it later in life, and we're doing just fine. Our kids will be fine too. Instead, I think that what is most important is that kids learn the skills that set them apart from the machines, skills that make them human instead. Now, parents, if you're worried about the idea of sending your kid to school without a phone, try challenging your own assumptions about safety. I once met a mother in Vancouver whose two teenage daughters ride public transit each day without smartphones. These two girls are hyper alert to the presence of creepy strangers, but they're very worried about all the other kids who ride transit who are oblivious to their surroundings with their earbuds in and their eyeballs down, scrolling videos on TikTok. Those kids have no idea what's going on around them. A good question is, who's actually safer in that situation? The kids who have a phone that they could use to hypothetically call a parent in a time of crisis, or the kids who are relying on ancient neural circuitry to detect and avoid danger? Once again, I maintain that our kids are safest when they have been given the tools and the wherewithal to navigate the real world without relying on a device. Now, what about other friends with phones? I often get this question, and I tell listeners that in my house, it's my rules. I have been known to confiscate my kids' friends' phones if they are getting in the way of interactions. Erin Lochner, the author of The Opt-Out Family, has a basket at her front door where all phones are expected to be deposited. And I have to say, kids are remarkably receptive to this. And I think it's because most are thrilled to hang out with other kids who are not on their phones for once. It's a novel and very exciting situation to be in. Now, when my kids go to other people's homes, the rules are different. It feels too presumptuous to impose my unconventional parenting philosophy on generous parents who are kindly hosting my kids in their homes, so I don't. I could also choose to not send my kids at all if I thought screens were a serious problem. Often my kids do go to their friends' houses and they play video games, sometimes for extended periods of time. But when they come home, I sense a certain amount of relief that we do things differently within the four walls of our own house. Parents, we need to think about the example that we are setting for children. How many times in the past week has your child called your name and you have felt perhaps a twinge of resentment because it pulls you away from whatever you're looking at on your phone? How often do you tell them to pause and let you snap a picture so that you can post it online? Beware that posting and checking for likes and comments tells your child that external validation matters more than simply enjoying an experience for its own sake. I recently learned a great new term called digital modesty. One writer described it as a general disposition to avoid any form of online self-presentation that veers into spectacle. Her rules included no selfies, no pictures of husband or kids, and no discussion of any interpersonal relationships whatsoever without explicit consent from the other person. I think this is very valuable advice, as we parents are quick to surrender details to the internet without thinking about the potential impact on our children. We need to get comfortable with setting firm boundaries. As parents and as teachers, as caregivers, as friends, we choose what is hard. It may help to reframe your efforts as giving your child back their life instead of letting devices steal it from them. When I hear from my own friends about the horrific things that they have faced with their own kids, things like cyberbullying and extreme anxiety induced by social media, and even multiple suicide attempts, I think I would much rather be arguing with my kid about why he can't have a phone than sitting next to his hospital bed wondering if he's going to make it. I do believe that the kids want help too. They might complain about you taking away their phone and ruining their life. They might even say they hate you, but I don't believe it, and many are struggling. One of the most heart-wrenching lines that I've ever seen comes from this young boy who posted on Reddit that he wants to do all sorts of things but never does. His daily screen time is around 11 hours a day, and he wrote, "How do I stop this crippling addiction?" There's a growing movement among Gen Z called Abstinent, which advocates for a social media free life. Its tagline says, "Social media is optional. Why isn't anyone telling us this?" More young people are realizing that trying to moderate platforms that are designed to hook us is a fool's errand. Balancing use requires constant maintenance, and it imposes a very steep psychological tax. Human beings will always be limited by their biology, whereas this technology can just improve infinitely. Sometimes it's best to step away. I like to finish with this question: is the future analog? The pandemic gave us the taste of the digital future that we were promised for so long, and we hated it. We realized that the things that matter the most in life are the real things, the physical things, the outdoor things, the things that bring us together in person with the people that we care about the most. We need to beware letting our kids fall back into a soul-sucking lifestyle that's dominated by screens. And so I urge you watching this tonight to be brave and to be bold, to listen to your gut instinct. Just because everyone else is doing something does not mean that you have to do it too. You have the right to say no, to change your mind, to insist on giving your child a higher quality childhood than one that is simply steeped in internet culture. When people tell me that resistance is futile, which I do sometimes hear, I tell them that resistance is the only most powerful tool that we have. And really, it could be the greatest gift that we give our children. So on that note, I will conclude my talk, and I thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We really appreciate that. I am going to take back the screen. Let me see if I can do this correctly. This may take me one moment. Do you see my screen by any? Oops, no, let me see.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, let me see. Okay. Do you see the resources? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Catherine just shared her screen that had resources, but we also wanted to share it on this slide. When we make this shareable, you can go ahead and click on this as well. This is links to her book, also links to the Anxious Generation book, if you're interested in looking at that. Also at the bottom, you'll see the Analog Family newsletter. Again, her newsletter comes out twice a week. I've subscribed to it and I just love receiving it. All of the information is super helpful. Thank you so much, Catherine. There are so many things that I got out of this and I was just like, yes, girl, yes. My children have experienced so much of what you're saying and I'm like tears in my eyes because my kids were there. And I'm so grateful to my kids who actually, they got off themselves off of social media. They decided themselves to get off of Instagram. And they're like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. It's just too much for me. And I applauded them. I'm so proud of them for doing that. And it made my daughter's senior year very difficult. There were lots of things going on, and it really disrupted her mental health. It made it very difficult. And that was one of the steps. She just had to get off of social media, had to get off of her phone. And that helped her tremendously. So I vouch for the things that you were saying. And she was able to step away, get a breather, and just really immerse herself back with family and with relationships and connecting face to face with people instead of this virtual, all of that. So Thank you so much. But again, these resources are available and they will be made available. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And thank you to our presenter again for guiding us through all of this valuable information. All of your statistics were so valid and so helpful. We're going to open it up now for questions. There is emoji down at the bottom. If you want to ask a question, there's a raise your hand emoji. It's a feature in the reactions tab below on your computer. You're welcome to do that. I think there's like 3 dots or the more section, and you can go ahead and use that. I think there's enough people if you want to just unmute yourself and or turn on your camera. You're welcome to ask a question, and we can go ahead and facilitate that. Again, stay muted unless you're called upon. We will do our best to get to everyone. Keep your questions kind of to a minimum so that we can be able to get to everyone. We want to be able to honor her time as well. If you do not wish to speak or to have your camera on, that's fine. We just want to be able to, again, honor that time. And I will go ahead and introduce Alicia Chavez, another family liaison, who will now facilitate our time of Q&A. Thank you so much.
We have a question from Liz. You can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. My question is that, Blue Ridge is a homeschool, and a lot of us are utilizing a lot of online programs. So my daughter has 3 different classes that she's taking right now. Independent study through BYU, which is, in Utah, and I'm in California. So the amount of time that she's kind of forced to spend on her computer is a lot. And also she's homeschooled. So having her, take those classes, she kind of has to be on Wi-Fi. So what are your recommendations to navigating what she has to do for school as opposed to some of the things you're asking us to implement, which might not be as reasonable for what she's doing?
Yes, thank you for your question. I can relate. When my oldest son started high school, he was handed the laptop, and now most of his schoolwork occurs on that device as well. And I also feel that he spends a fair amount of time on that device, attending classes, but also having to submit all of his assignments and do a lot of his studying and his reading on it. So I get it. I think that that's an example of technology being used as a tool, not a toy. And that is an important distinction. My whole approach is not anti-tech. It's about putting the tech in its rightful place. And in this case, that device is enabling your child to have this fantastic alternative form of education. So I wouldn't feel bad about that if I were you. I did mention this at one point, but I think it just makes it all the more important than to protect the child's screen-free time outside of school. So really making an effort to curb the personal entertainment-based screen time wherever you can when your child's not doing their schoolwork. So that would be my recommendation. Really cut back on all of the other screen time that is not necessary, so that the screen time that they're spending doing the schoolwork really is not as significant a chunk out of their day. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. I also struggle to get her out of her bed. Like you said, I don't want her screens in her bed, but we live in kind of a small apartment here in LA. And so just we're all in each other's face and in each other's business. And she has a lot of tutors and online tutors and things that she's, doing hour-long math session or an hour-long history session or whatever. And she kind of wants her privacy to be able to do that, obviously. And, her dad and I, if we are working from home that day, want our space as well. So how do I get her out of her room? How do I get her out of her bed?
Another good question. Is there a way that you could maybe set up a desk or a space within her room and sort of insist that the technology has to stay there? And there's a zone where it's sort of cordoned, or there's that boundary that you're creating. Definitely, I agree with you. My gut instinct would be trying to get out of the bed is ideal. But I recognize that it sounds like you do have some space restrictions, which could make it really hard. I know that this is a struggle with many parents who work remotely as well on their devices, trying to delineate between time spent with family and time spent working and not have it all bleed into each other. everyone's living arrangement is different. I mean, if you have no workarounds, really, I don't think you should beat yourself up over it too much, but trying to create a space that's dedicated to the laptop could be beneficial, I think, but
Yeah,
be kind to yourself as well.
thank you.
We had a question submitted through the Q&A, and it says, do you recommend monitoring our teens' Google chats?
Yes, I would. I think that it's important as parents to make it clear to our kids that they don't have a right to that privacy necessarily on the internet because there's too much at stake. I think that we're also mentoring them. We're teaching them how to be and how to hold themselves, how to interact with other people online. And I think that it's really important that our kids know that we could jump in at any point and ask to see things and have issues with things and need to discuss them. The children do not have, I think, a right to privacy in that regard. If it's on the internet, it's not private anyways, right? I talked to a mother today. I was giving a talk earlier today, just outside of Philadelphia in person, and she said that she has a very strict contract with her teens where they talk about it to the point where the mother only has to put out her hand and the teen has to hand the phone over. The mother knows all of the passwords. If the teen changes the password, the parent takes that phone back. So really, she said it's worked well for her and her 4 children. There's that sense that the parents own that technology. They're paying for it. They are training the child's habits. So I would say, yes, I think this is something that you should be supervising, and your child should be aware that their parent could see whatever they're putting out there at any moment.
Thank you, Catherine. I think in general, and even as adults, I think we forget whenever we do something online, it's literally like everyone can see it, it's going out and it just never comes back. I know, like, sometimes I forget that. We had another hand. Oh, from Liz. Do you have a follow-up question, Liz? You can unmute.
I do. Sorry to monopolize. My daughter is also a creative. She's very creative, young 13-year-old ingenue, if you will. And one of the things that she has started doing recently that is that I struggle to know how to handle is she's using an AI chatbot to bounce ideas off the chatbot for character names and story prompts and different things that she might want to use throughout her writing. She's using it as a tool, but sometimes, like, she's face down talking to this chatbot for too long. And when do you when do you realize that the tool is leaning into something not tool like?
Ooh, that's a really great question. I would be wary of the use of the chatbot in a situation like that. And I think it's because she's still developing her creative muscles. And I recently read an article on this where the reliance on AI can amplify certain people's creative abilities and it can really stunt other people's creative capabilities. And it's because they start to develop less confidence in the way that their own brains are thinking. They feel like they have to be asking the AI to give them the ideas and to verify their thoughts and sort of validate the things that they're feeling. And I think that that could actually end up being a bit of a crutch for your daughter right at this point where she's on the cusp of developing these interests and these abilities on her own. So I would probably cut down on that if I could, especially because it can quickly turn into, like you said, prolonged chatting and too much of a reliance and just maybe an unhealthy attachment to this thing that's really real. And I think the more we can live in the real world, the better it is, especially for these kids. There will come a time, no doubt, where she's going to be using AI. We're all going to be using AI a lot more in the things that we do. Again, it's very much about creating that baseline at this critical point in their lives where they're just present here. They're not relying on the devices to entertain themselves and to give them ideas or to validate their thoughts. That would be my recommendation to you. Just maybe pull back on that if you can. But it's great that she's doing all of these artistic endeavors. That's good.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
On another note, last year we had another E3 session, and it was specifically on AI. And the speaker talked about the do's and don'ts with AI, like kind of what to talk about and what not to. Like, don't give specific address information to when using AI. So that might be something you want to look at or listen to. If there's a recording about it.
Any other questions? You can drop them in the chat. You can raise your hand, and you can just ask them live for Catherine. I have a question in the meantime, in case someone else is thinking of one. I think I'm wondering more from the parent side, because you hopefully practice what you preach, right? And our kids are learning like what they see, and so I guess like what are some your kids, I guess, never grew up. You didn't they never had something and then it got taken away, right? They kind of just grew up in this is how we're gonna do things, and that they knew the expectations. But I guess for families, like if that is maybe a heavier presence in their lives, the baby steps, like, hey, like we're gonna, mom and dad, like, here we are, like we're not gonna be having our phones here, or we're gonna like put them. I've heard of those boxes, by the way. I don't know what they are, but I've heard of these boxes that you like put it in. I think it like mutes it, or I don't know what it does. But yeah, what are some like baby steps, I guess, to kind of work your way towards having it less like being so attached?
And you're talking about parents specifically, correct?
That's my question. Yeah, from the parent side.
Yeah. Well, I think I sort of alluded to this before in my other answer, but I think really delineating between work time and family time. I think if you can sort of be strict about saving, responding to your work emails and taking calls and things and to certain hours of the day, perhaps, and then when you are with your children, truly being present for them, I think can be really powerful to your kid. Kids want to feel like they have their parents' attention. And right now, a lot of parents are very fragmented. They're texting all the time, all day long, and the kids are just desperate for a little bit of attention. So I work from home. I get the struggle. I totally understand how I want to be looking at things online because it's always changing and there's always information to be responding to and reacting to. But I think it's important to sort of batch your work and even your personal phone use. So, if I want to look at Instagram for a little bit now and then, I try to wait until the evening when my kids have gone to bed. I don't want them to see me looking at it when I, should be making dinner or we're lying on the beach together or go out for a hike or something. That actually might be a little bit uncomfortable. Some parents recommend narrating what they're doing on their devices. It sort of holds us accountable. If we're telling our child, I'm looking up a recipe, or we're going to FaceTime grandma now, this is the reason I have my phone out. It can make a little bit more sense to a child that there is a purpose that's being, accomplished by having this phone out instead of just seeing mommy with her face buried in her phone again. So that's one thing that can be very helpful. I think parents can benefit from these, digital fasts, the tech Shabbat that I mentioned as well. Having that 24-hour fast can be a really great example to set for your kids as well. And if you do it as a family, the child sees what you're doing and that you're putting in that effort themselves, and then they will model that behavior too. I think little things like making a phone call to someone instead of just engaging in an endless text back and forth, which can go on and on for hours, can be a very efficient use of your time. And again, something that a kid can observe. Mommy called her friend to plan this coffee date or to plan this play date instead of just texting. So I also look for a lot of analog alternatives, which might almost seem old fashioned, but I think have value. So I love to cook from cookbooks. I have a cookbook collection that I pull out instead of cooking from an iPhone or a tablet. Not everyone wants to do that. I'm not saying it would work for everyone, but for my kids, I find them flipping through my cookbooks and recognizing recipes that I've made. And it's just another thing that I can add to my life that gets me off the device. So you can find those little small acts of rebellion, I sometimes call them, little things that you can introduce. Those are just a few ideas.
That's good. That's very helpful. I like the analog alternatives. I feel like it's easier because you think like, oh, that's how we used to do it. And then suddenly it just got replaced by this. So that's good. I don't think there's any more questions. If you do have some, like you are looking at this later and you forget or whatever, please feel free to email familyliaisons@theblueridgeacademy.com. And then I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Anna.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, once again, thank you for joining us. This recording and the slides will be made available in the coming days on our E3 document using the QR code underneath the flyer, as you see right there. For any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to the Family Liaisons for further support at the email address below. Also, we have actually an additional QR code right there, and it says, scan me. If you would like to give us any feedback on our virtual events, this is a survey for this presentation. Just let us know if it was applicable to you. If you have any other, maybe other topics that you would love us to address, anything else that you feel like we can help to support you with, we would love to do that. We strive to support our families and offer resources that any of our families may need. And we're open to any recommendations you might have. We look forward to seeing you next month at our next E3 Parent Summit, which will happen April 16th. And our next one is featuring community service and acts of kindness. We are going to be looking out for our students and families who are doing it out in the community, doing community service, any acts of kindness. We are going to be showcasing our families. So if that is you, if your families are out there doing acts of service within the community, we would love to showcase you and your families, you and your students, whether it's through Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, however that is, or whether you're doing it with a group. We have several of our CCs doing beach cleanups in April. So if you're being part of that, we would love to hear that as well. So we're so excited for next month, but we are so grateful. Thank you so much, Catherine, for spending this time with us, investing in our families here at Blue Ridge Academy. Again, we are just so grateful. Thank you for your content. Thank you for all of the information that you were able to give to us today. We are just so honored to have you. We wish you the best of luck. We know, I've seen your website. I've seen how busy you are starting to become. I'm so glad we were able to get you on the calendar this year. We wish the best of you and your future. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here this evening.
Thank you. And everyone else, thank you so much for watching this, being part of this. We wish you the best at the Blue Ridge Academy. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.